Good morning and welcome, dear students. I am Ama E. Agwo, your lecturer. This is ENG 110, Introduction to Poetry. Our topic for today is the definition of poetry. The definition of poetry. Poetry is a kind of careful writing or tale where words are carefully chosen for their various effects. Such effects may be sound, emotional, imagistic, suggestive, even symbolic effects. Yes. Well, the truth is that one of the factors that distinguishes poetry from any other kind of writing or literature is its line and stanza. So poetry is written in line and now we want to move over to the category of poetry. The category of poetry in our next slide. The category of poetry. There are two broad categories of poetry, the traditional and the poetry. Let's look at today let's check the traditional poetry today. Traditional poetry is as old as man himself, even as old as human language. The truth is that man has always expressed his deepest feelings in poetic levels, in poetic measures. African traditional poetry is the oral poetry that is handed down from generation to generation. Although in the modern times, people have written down this traditional poetry and have even translated them in various languages. However, the effort to write them down and even translate them in actual sense gets a few things missing. The traditional cadence in actuality, most of them are lost. You get to find out that African traditional poetry is rich in figurative language, present beautiful pictures in words, reflecting on man and his world, including his worship and other concerns, as Senamo and Vincent put them. Now we want to look at these types of African traditional poetry. The types include religious poetry, which is through invocations and incantations. We'll see this during marriage ceremonies, during religious worships. We also have the dirges where the singer have a lamentation, a cry, painful cries occasioned by loss, loneliness, and other challenges. There are praise poetry where the valor of men and women are brought to the fore. There's the Civil War poetry that concerns itself with war, sometimes historical wars. There's the occupational poetry where songs are sung to enliven the spirit of workers. For instance, from my traditional place, when you are engaged in the business of cracking kernel, you sing some songs. For instance, we used to sing as we are gathered around the kernel heap, with your friends. Aki akbola yigbe, aki aki, aki akbola yigbe, aki aki, aki akbola yigbe, aki aki, piam 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 piam, aki aki. You see, the piam 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 is the rhythm. It is the movement of your hand with the stone dealing with the kernel, actually cracking them. And you see that the other people involved also participate. So the audience is participatory. That is occupational poetry. It 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 enhances productivity. There are the topical poetry, poems you never thought of prior to time, spontaneously, according to occasion. They just come up. For instance, there was a day I was fixing my car, and it has taken really some money, and the mechanics were in my house working, and my son started singing, uh, I want to buy moto, I want to buy moto, see moto, see trouble, jum jum. Imagine a topical poem. Then the celebratory poetry, and there are other kinds of poetry like the satiric poetry, epic poetry, the lullabies, the poetry of abuse. There is the elegy. Yes, elegy is a poem of mourning, but it is specifically mourning about the death of someone. When it is mourning about a general thing that is apart from death, it becomes a dirge. And want to move ahead to the features of this traditional poetry. The features of traditional poetry may vary from place to place. Yes, the way and manner you do them specifically in your home, in your land, in your place may be a little different from the way we realize them in mine. However, there are general features and we want to consider them. One is that it is an oral composition. It is general. Traditional poetry are composed orally, yeah, handed from down orally from generation to generation. And then they are community owned. It does not belong to any individual. The entire community owns them. And another is that it enjoys spontaneity, spontaneous composition. As I spoke about the occupational poetry, the topical poetry, you just it just wells up in you and you begin to compose. And there can be continued additions or embellishments as a feature. This is because as you compose, even bearing in mind what has been handed down to you, you can make some additions, some digressions according to your art. That is beautiful. It is an attribute, a feature of traditional poetry. Then there is the call and response pattern. You just heard the one I sang about the occupation of poem. The audience is a participatory audience. They help you to sound the chorus or the refrain. In that way, everyone is involved. There's also the use of percussion, and as I demonstrated, the rhythmic bouncing of the kernel, cracking them, boom, 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 acts as percussion. Percussion also can be pairs of flattened oval-shaped wood that you clap together to produce beautiful sounds. It could also be a rhythmic tapping of the leg against the earth and through some other measures. It also involves dance. Well, you really noticed that I danced actually as I realized it. And there's multiple voices, of course. People adding their voices to the rendition. There's narrativity because these poems actually talk about history. Their repetition, it ripples with milk, fills with rhetorical questions, and it enjoys immediacy. These are the features of traditional poetry. This is where we'll come to the end of today's class. Well, at 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 the reaction session, you can drop your questions, which will be attended to in the next class. And it is bye.